The autumn of 1884 brought two things to Prosperity Creek: Dakota Territory. The first Killingfrost and Miss Catherine Kate Sullivan, who arrived on the morning stage with nothing but a carpetbag, a typewriter, and enough determination to move mountains. Kate was 26 years old, with auburn hair that refused to stay properly pinned and green eyes that missed nothing. She'd learned the newspaper business working for her father at the Chicago Tribune, but when consumption took him that spring, she'd inherited something unexpected: a half-interest in the Prosperity Creek Herald, a failing frontier newspaper she'd never heard of. "You sure this is the right place, miss?" asked the stage driver, eyeing the ramshackle buildings that lined the town's muddy main street. "Don't look like much prosperity to me." Kate surveyed her new home with a journalist's eye. Prosperity Creek had the look of a boomtown past its prime. False-fronted buildings with peeling paint, a saloon on every corner, and the kind of desperate energy that came from people trying to squeeze the last drops of wealth from played-out claims. "It's perfect," she said, shouldering her carpetbag. "Every story worth telling starts in a place that doesn't look like much." The Herald's office was squeezed between Murphy's Saloon and Chen's Laundry, a narrow building with a hand-painted sign that had seen better days. Inside, Kate found dust, cobwebs, and a printing press that looked older than the territory itself. "You must be the new owner," said a voice from the shadows. A thin man emerged from behind the press, wiping ink-stained hands on a leather apron. "I'm Ezra Whitman. Been running this place since your father's partner died last spring." "Kate Sullivan," she replied, extending her hand. "And I'm not just the owner. I'm the new editor." Ezra's eyebrows shot up. "Editor? But that is, most folks around here ain't used to." "A woman running a newspaper?" Kate finished with a smile. "Then it's time they got used to it. What's our circulation?" "About 200 on a good week. Most folks can't read anyway, and those that can." Ezra shrugged. "Well, let's just say the Herald ain't been much for hard news lately." Kate picked up the latest edition, scanning the front page. It was filled with social notices, advertisements for patent medicines, and a glowing article about the continued prosperity of the local mining operations. "Who writes this?" she asked. "Mayor Blackwood's secretary. He pays us $5 a week to print whatever he wants on the front page." Kate crumpled the paper and tossed it into the wastebasket. "Not anymore. From now on, the Herald prints news, real news, the kind that matters to the people who live here." Her first edition came out 3 days later, and it caused a sensation. Instead of puff pieces about mining prosperity, Kate had investigated the actual conditions at the claims. She'd interviewed miners about their wages, safety conditions, and the company store prices that kept them perpetually in debt. The headline read, "Prosperity for Whom? The Real Story Behind Prosperity Creek's Boom." By noon, every copy had sold out. By evening, Kate had her first visitor. Mayor Josiah Blackwood was a large man who'd grown rich on other people's labor, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He entered the Herald office flanked by two men whose job descriptions probably didn't include customer service. "Miss Sullivan," Blackwood said, his voice carrying the false warmth of a snake oil salesman. "Welcome to Prosperity Creek. I trust you're finding our little community hospitable?" "Very much so," Kate replied, not looking up from the story she was writing. "The people here have been wonderfully helpful. So many interesting stories to tell." "Yes, well, that's what I wanted to discuss. You see, we have certain traditions here, certain understandings about what kind of news is appropriate for a family publication." Kate finally looked up, her green eyes meeting his without flinching. "And what kind would that be, Mr. Mayor?" "The kind that builds community spirit. The kind that attracts investment and settlement. The kind that doesn't give people the wrong impression about our fair town." "You mean the kind that doesn't tell the truth?" Blackwood's smile faltered. "Miss Sullivan, I think you misunderstand the situation here. The Herald has always been a community partner. We've supported each other, worked together for the common good." "Whose common good?" Kate asked, standing up to face him directly. "The miners working 12-hour shifts for company scrip, the families paying inflated prices at the company store, the workers who can't afford to leave because they're trapped in debt." Those are complex economic issues that a young lady from back east couldn't possibly understand, Blackwood said, his voice hardening. Perhaps you should stick to social news, recipes, fashion advice, things more suited to your background. Kate smiled, and there was steel in it. Mr. Blackwood, I've been covering politics and corruption since I was 16 years old. I've interviewed senators and exposed aldermen. I've seen every trick in the book, and you, sir, are not nearly as clever as you think you are. Blackwood's face flushed red. Miss Sullivan, I strongly advise you to reconsider your approach. Prosperity Creek can be a dangerous place for those who don't understand how things work. Is that a threat, Mr. Mayor? It's friendly advice. Good day, Miss Sullivan. After they left, Ezra emerged from behind the press where he'd been hiding. Kate, maybe you should listen to him. Blackwood's got a lot of power in this town. Power built on keeping people ignorant, Kate replied, already back at her typewriter. That's about to change. Her investigation began in earnest the next day. Kate had learned from her father that the best stories came from listening to ordinary people, so she spent her mornings in Chen's Laundry, Murphy's Saloon, and the company store, talking to anyone who'd share their experiences. What she discovered was a system of exploitation that would have made a robber baron blush. The Prosperity Creek Mining Company, owned by a consortium of Eastern investors with Blackwood as their local representative, had created a closed economic system designed to extract maximum profit while keeping workers trapped. Miners were paid in company scrip that could only be spent at the company store, where prices were inflated 300% above normal rates. Housing was company-owned and overpriced. Medical care was provided by a company doctor who charged exorbitant fees. Workers who complained were blacklisted and run out of town. But the real corruption went deeper. Kate discovered that Blackwood was skimming money from territorial development funds, taking bribes from the mining company, and using his position to acquire land through fraudulent means. This is bigger than just local corruption, Kate told Ezra as she worked late into the night, her typewriter keys clicking like machine gun fire. This connects to the territorial capital, maybe even Washington. We're looking at a systematic looting of public resources. Kate, Ezra said nervously, maybe we should contact the territorial authorities. Let them handle this. Kate looked up from her work, her eyes bright with the thrill of the hunt. Ezra, half the territorial authorities are probably in on it. The only way to stop this is to expose it, all of it, in black and white where everyone can see. Her expose ran as a special edition distributed free throughout the territory. The headline read, "The Prosperity Conspiracy: How Eastern Investors and Corrupt Officials Are Looting Dakota Territory." The response was immediate and explosive. Within hours, Kate's office was surrounded by an angry crowd, but not the kind she'd expected. These were miners, farmers, small business owners, and families who'd been victimized by the system she'd exposed. "Miss Sullivan," called out Mary Chen, the laundry owner's wife. "Is this all true? About the territorial funds?" "Every word," Kate replied from her office doorway. "I have documents, witness statements, financial records. It's all true." "Then what do we do about it?" asked Tom Murphy, the saloon keeper whose business had been hurt by the company store's monopoly. Kate stepped out onto the wooden sidewalk, facing the crowd with the confidence of someone who'd found her calling. "We organize. We demand accountability. We make sure every voter in the territory knows what's been happening here." "But the election's only 2 weeks away," protested Dr. Sarah Mitchell, one of the few other professional women in town. "How can we get the word out in time?" Kate smiled. "Leave that to me. I know a thing or two about running a newspaper campaign." What followed was the most intensive 2 weeks of journalism in Dakota Territory's history. Kate transformed the Herald from a sleepy local paper into a crusading voice for reform. She printed extra editions, organized distribution networks, and coordinated with reform-minded editors in other towns. But Blackwood wasn't sitting idle. The threats escalated from verbal warnings to broken windows, from mysterious fires to outright intimidation. Kate's office was ransacked twice, her printing press sabotaged, and her sources threatened with violence. "Maybe we should back off," Ezra suggested after finding their latest editions scattered in the street. "This is getting dangerous." "Dangerous for whom?" Kate replied. already setting type for the next day's paper. For us, or for the people who've been stealing from this territory for years. The breaking point came 3 days before the election. Kate had been working late, preparing a final exposé that would reveal the full extent of the conspiracy, when she heard footsteps on the wooden sidewalk outside. Through the window, she could see Blackwood approaching with 4 armed men. Not local toughs, but professional gunmen with the cold eyes of killers. Kate quickly gathered her most important documents and stuffed them into a leather satchel. There was a back door that led to the alley behind the building, but she knew they'd have it covered. Her only chance was to brazen it out. When Blackwood entered, Kate was sitting calmly at her desk, apparently working on a story about the upcoming church social. "Miss Sullivan," Blackwood said, his voice carrying a finality that chilled her blood. "I'm afraid your time in Prosperity Creek has come to an end." "Really? I was just getting comfortable." "You've caused enough trouble. It's time for you to move on. Permanently." Kate looked up from her typewriter, her green eyes steady. "And if I refuse?" Blackwood nodded to his men, who stepped forward with hands resting on their gun butts. "I don't think you understand. This isn't a request." "No," said a new voice from the doorway. "I don't think you understand." Tom Murphy stepped into the office, a shotgun cradled in his arms. Behind him came Dr. Mitchell, Mary Chen, and a dozen other townspeople, all armed and determined. "The lady's under our protection now," Murphy said quietly. "Anyone who wants to hurt her will have to go through us first." Blackwood's face went white with rage. "You people don't know what you're doing. I have connections, power." "You had power," corrected Dr. Mitchell. "Past tense." "We've been reading Miss Sullivan's articles, and we've been talking to our neighbors. Your power was built on keeping us divided and ignorant. That ends now." The standoff lasted for several tense minutes before Blackwood finally backed down. He and his gunmen retreated, but not before the mayor delivered one final threat. "This isn't over, Sullivan. The election won't change anything. We have too much invested here to let a bunch of farmers and shopkeepers ruin everything." After they left, Kate turned to the people who'd risked their lives to protect her. "Thank you," she said simply. "But you know this means war." "Then we better win it," Murphy replied with a grim smile. The final 3 days before the election were a whirlwind of activity. Kate's newspaper became the headquarters for a grassroots political movement that spread across the territory. Reform candidates emerged to challenge Blackwood's cronies. Voter registration drives brought hundreds of new people into the democratic process. But Kate knew that Blackwood wouldn't go down without a fight. On election day, she stationed herself at the polling place with her camera, a new invention that most people in Prosperity Creek had never seen before. "What's that contraption for?" asked the election judge, a Blackwood appointee named Silas Crane. "Documentation," Kate replied cheerfully. "I want to make sure this election is conducted fairly and legally." Throughout the day, Kate photographed everything: voters casting ballots, election officials counting votes, and most importantly, the suspicious activities of Blackwood's supporters. When she caught Crane stuffing ballot boxes with pre-marked votes, her camera captured the evidence that would later send him to prison. The results were a landslide for reform. Blackwood was voted out of office, along with most of his cronies. The new territorial legislature launched investigations that eventually led to dozens of indictments and the recovery of hundreds of thousands of dollars in stolen funds. But Kate's greatest victory came 6 months later, when the territorial governor signed the Dakota Press Freedom Act, guaranteeing the right of newspapers to investigate and report on government activities without fear of retaliation. "You did it," Ezra told her, as they watched the celebration in the street outside their office. "You actually changed things." Kate smiled, already working on her next story. "We did it, Ezra. All of us together. That's how democracy is supposed to work." The Prosperity Creek Herald became one of the most respected newspapers in the territory, and Kate Sullivan became a legend in frontier journalism. She covered statehood, women's suffrage, and the transformation of the Wild West into the modern American West. But she never forgot the lesson she learned in that first confrontation with corruption: that the pen truly is mightier than the sword, but only when it's wielded by someone brave enough to tell the truth. no matter the cost. Years later, when young journalists would ask her for advice, Kate would always tell them the same thing. A newspaper isn't just a business, it's a public trust. Your job isn't to make people comfortable with lies, but to make them uncomfortable with the truth. Because only when people are uncomfortable enough with injustice will they finally do something about it. The Herald building still stands in what's now Prosperity, South Dakota, with a bronze plaque that reads, "Here, Kate Sullivan proved that democracy depends not on the powerful, but on the informed. Here the frontier learned that the greatest weapon against corruption is a free press in the hands of a fearless journalist." And in the newspaper's archives, carefully preserved, is Kate's original typewriter, the same machine that clicked through those dangerous nights in 1884, when one woman's courage and a community's determination changed the course of history, one story at a time.